In the summer of 1999, Pakistani troops disguised as militants had crept across the line of control and occupied 132 mountain positions inside Indian territory, high altitude posts, some at 18,000 feet. India's army was trying to take them back, and they needed to know exactly where those positions were. So, India asked the United States for GPS data. Precise coordinates, the kind that would tell an artillery officer exactly where to aim. America said no. There is no official confirmation of this from Washington. The US position, such as it is, has always been that it was staying neutral in the conflict. But India's military planners heard the same message and they remembered it. Their soldiers were fighting and dying on 18,000-foot ridge lines, and the most powerful navigation system on Earth, owned by America, was switched off for them. That single moment, call it a humiliation, call it a wake up call, call it whatever you want, is the reason we are talking today. Because out of that denial came a decision. India would never be that blind again. This is the story of NavIC, India's attempt to build its own GPS, the disasters that nearly killed it, and why right now, in March 2026, that system is in more trouble than at any point in its history. This is a story about satellites, atomic clocks, geopolitics, and what it actually means for a nation of 1.4 billion people to not be able to trust where they are. Let's start with basics because most international audiences have never heard of NavIC, and that itself tells you something. NavIC stands for Navigation with Indian Constellation. In Hindi, NavIC means sailor, someone who navigates. The system is India's answer to GPS, Russia's GLONASS, Europe's Galileo, and China's BeiDou. But unlike those global systems, NavIC is designed as a regional system, covering India and a zone roughly 1,500 kilometers beyond its borders. That 1,500-kilometer ring is not an accident. It covers every country on India's border. It covers the line of control with Pakistan. It covers the Himalayan frontier with China. It is designed to give India sovereign, unjammable, uninterruptible navigation data across every theater where it might fight a war. Unlike GPS satellites that orbit in medium Earth orbit at around 20,000 kilometers, NavIC satellites are parked much higher, in geostationary and geosynchronous orbits at 36,000 kilometers. This means they are almost permanently overhead India. That gives them better signal angles for the dense forests and deep mountain valleys of the subcontinent where low orbit GPS signals can get blocked. On paper, NavIC promised 10-meter accuracy over India. GPS gives you 15 to 20 meters. NavIC was designed to be better. GPS USA 31 satellites, global 15-20 emit accuracy. BeiDou China 44 plus satellites, global 10 MA accuracy, military service for China and Pakistan. Galileo EU 30 satellites, global 1 MEM with augmentation GLONASS Russia. 24 satellites, global 5 to 10 accuracy NavIC India. Designed for 7 satellites, regional 10 m accuracy over India. One number there should give you pause. NavIC was designed for just 7 satellites. GPS has 31, BeiDou has 44, Galileo has 30. India was not trying to build a global system. It was trying to build just enough sovereignty to never get caught blind again. Here's the physics that makes everything else make sense. A GPS receiver on the ground figures out where it is by timing signals from multiple satellites simultaneously. If you have one satellite, you know you're somewhere on a sphere centered on that satellite. Two satellites somewhere on a circle. Three satellites at one of 2 points. Four satellites, and you have a precise three-dimensional fix. Longitude, latitude, altitude. That's the minimum. Four satellites visible at once. Now, here's where the story gets painful. Each satellite carries not one but three atomic clocks. Not because one isn't enough in normal operation, it is, but because if an atomic clock fails in space, you cannot fix it. You cannot send a repair crew to a satellite orbiting 36,000 kilometers above Earth. When the clock dies, the satellite's ability to do navigation is gone. The redundancy is the survival strategy. India's NavIC satellites each came equipped with three rubidium atomic clocks sourced from Spectra Time, a Swiss manufacturer. It seemed like a solid choice. Rubidium clocks are proven, reliable, widely used in aerospace, and then they started failing, not occasionally, systematically. An atomic clock works by measuring the natural vibration frequency of atoms, typically rubidium or cesium. These atoms oscillate at a specific perfectly constant rate. The clock counts those oscillations. It's so precise that a good rubidium clock loses or gains less than 1 second in a million years. In a navigation satellite, this precision is everything. The satellite broadcasts a signal with a timestamp. Your receiver measures how long the signal took to arrive. Multiply that time by the speed of light, about 300,000 kilometers per second, and you get distance. With four satellites doing this simultaneously, you get a position. But here's the brutal mathematics. Light travels about 30 centimeters in 1 nanosecond, 1 billionth of a second. So a clock error of just 1 nanosecond creates a position error of 30 centimeters. A microsecond error, 1 millionth of a second, puts you 300 meters off target. In a battlefield, 300 meters is the difference between hitting a command post and hitting a hospital. India launched nine first generation IRNSS satellites between 2013 and 2018. Only 8 reached their intended orbits. And of those 8, the atomic clocks began failing almost immediately. In 2016, all three atomic clocks on IRNSS 1A stopped functioning. The satellite became a ghost, orbiting uselessly, transmitting nothing useful for navigation. Then 1C failed, then 1D, then 1E, then 1G. Five of the first 8 satellites lost all three of their backup clocks. By 2025, ISRO was forced to admit through an RTI response that 5 satellites were completely defunct, all clocks dead. Launched 11 NavIC satellites total, including two NVS series, providing full navigation, 3 satellites as of March 2026. Used only for messaging, clocks dead, 4 satellites. Decommissioned, 1 satellite. Failed to reach orbit, 2 satellites. IRNSS 1H, NVS 02. On March 13, 2026, just days before this video was made, ISRO announced that IRNSS 1F had completed its 10-year design life and its final atomic clock had stopped working. That took India from 4 operational navigation satellites to 3. The minimum threshold is 4. India's sovereign GPS system is, at this moment, technically below the minimum level required to provide reliable positioning across the country. Let that land. The system built specifically to ensure India would never be dependent on a foreign GPS is now so degraded that India may need to rely on foreign GPS to make up the gap. To understand how serious this is, let's look at the neighborhood. China began building BeiDou in 2000, driven by the same fear that drove India. By 2020, BeiDou was fully global. Today, it operates 44 operational satellites. It has two tiers of service, a free civilian layer with 10-meter accuracy and a restricted military layer with 10-centimeter accuracy, available only to China's People's Liberation Army and to Pakistan's armed forces. China has granted its military grade navigation service 10 centimeter precision to Pakistan. India's two most likely adversaries are sharing a navigation system that India cannot access, cannot jam, and cannot deny. Pakistan has no independent navigation satellite. Since 2018, Pakistan's military has had access to BeiDou's restricted military service. That means Pakistani missile systems, artillery, and drone operations can theoretically use 10 centimeter precision coordinates, courtesy of Beijing, while India is scrambling to keep 3 satellites working. Japan operates the quasi zenith satellite system with 4 satellites that enhance GPS accuracy over Japan and the Asia Pacific. Japan's approach was smart. augment GPS rather than replace it. They achieved sub-meter accuracy for Japan by working with an existing global system. India chose the harder path, full independence. United States GPS 31 operational satellites, at minimum 24 maintained at all times. The US literally has backup satellites on standby. The GPS budget is in the billions annually. It powers a global economy. India, 3 functional navigation satellites. For a country of 1.4 billion people with two nuclear armed adversaries on its border, one of whom has 44 satellite coverage with military precision courtesy of Beijing. This is the gap. This is why what India does next matters enormously. ISRO isn't giving up. It learned from the rubidium clock disaster and built a second generation of NavIC satellites, the NVS series. These are bigger, better, and critically, they use indigenous atomic clocks. Rubidium clocks, designed and built by ISRO's own Space Applications Center in Ahmedabad. India is no longer dependent on Switzerland for the heartbeat of its navigation system. The NVS series also adds a new frequency band, L1, which is the same frequency used by GPS and Galileo, because it means that newer smartphones can use NavIC without any hardware changes. Apple's recent iPhone models already support it. Xiaomi, OnePlus, Samsung flagships NavIC compatible. The civilian rollout is slowly, painfully happening. NVS-01 launched in May 2023 and is working as intended. India's one bright spot, its indigenous clock is ticking accurately. NVS-02 launched in January 2025, ISRO's 100th mission. It failed to reach its intended orbit. A connector in the propulsion system didn't engage. The satellite is stuck in a lower orbit, unable to raise itself where it needs to be. NVS-03, NVS-04, and NVS-05 are planned for launch by end of 2026. But ISRO has seen 3 failures in 6 missions between January 2025 and January 2026. The timeline is optimistic. Meanwhile, the two remaining first generation satellites that still work are aging. IRNSS 1B has already exceeded its planned 10-year lifespan. It is running on borrowed time. If it fails before NVS 03 launches, India drops to 2 navigation satellites. 2. With 2 satellites, you can't even calculate a basic position fix. If that happens, India's military would be back in the same position it was in Kargil 1999, not flying blind because an adversary denied access, flying blind because the clock stopped ticking. Here's the uncomfortable truth that India's space program has to sit with. The ambition was right. After Kargil, after GPS denial, after watching China build BeiDou from scratch into a 44 satellite global system, India absolutely needed its own navigation constellation. The decision to build NavIC was correct. Strategic autonomy in navigation is not a luxury for a country in India's neighborhood, it is a necessity. But execution failed. Imported atomic clocks that failed systematically, launch cadence that left gaps of years, a second generation satellite that couldn't reach orbit, a program that, in March 2026, has fewer operational satellites than the minimum threshold to do its job. The metaphor writes itself. India's system for never being blind again is partly blind. What happens next depends on whether ISRO can recover from 3 mission failures in a year, whether NVS-03 reaches orbit, and whether the two surviving first generation satellites hold on long enough to let the cavalry arrive. China's BeiDou has 44 satellites and is already providing military precision to Pakistan. GPS has 31 satellites with backups on standby. India has 3 with one more on borrowed time. The race India started in 1999 to never be blind again is not over. But right now, it is losing ground, and the clock for once is not on India's side. This was the story of NavIC. Subscribe for more deep dives on the geopolitics of space, technology, and the quiet wars being fought 36,000 kilometers above your head.